think right now, automation has created so much stuff getting thrown your way through automation that you have to figure out ways to cut through the noise and be relevant. And that's the big piece of it. I think personalization is important, but not like it used to be. You know, people are like, oh, wow, I saw you went to the same college as my buddy Fred did. You know, I'd be like, that's not personalization like it used to be. Everyone sees through that these days. It's relevance that wins. And if you can be relevant and stick out and do something different, maybe like create a custom video or do something that is human, people are going to gravitate towards that over all the static emails that are being sent.
Did you clear your cash flow?
All right, for those of you who are looking to get more sales for your company, you won't want to miss this entire episode. We had Gabe Lullo on, who goes deep into how he's built multiple companies and also helped countless other companies, hundreds of companies in the tech space and, you know, other spaces, insurance, real estate, all sorts of different industries, scale their sales organization through SDRs and outbounding. And he gets into a lot of different detailed topics about what's working, what's not working, what has changed in the industry since 2021. A lot of companies were experiencing really great sales metrics and results with their sales team back in 2021, but they're no longer getting the same results in 2023. So he goes into why that is and what companies can do about that to get their results back up. We get into AI. You know, what is AI good or bad for sales? That's at the end of the episode. So if you want to hear about if you want to hear about Gabe's take on AI, definitely stay tuned through the whole episode. And that's it. I hope you enjoy. Gabe Lullo on the show today. Gabe, you're the CEO of Alleyoop, a global leader in sales development as a service. You've literally trained over 1,000 SDRs over the last decade. I don't know how you even begin to train that many. I'm sure it was quite a handful to bring in that many reps and scale a business to where you've scaled it to. But I'm really excited to dive in to your entire career. You've got some interesting stories we've talked about before we started recording. So I'm interested to dive into all of that and just kind of hear interesting insights about how companies can do outbound.
Yeah, Brian, and thanks so much for having me on the show. Love your show, by the way. And I'm excited to dig into it. You know what? It kind of started with my career. Went to school in Connecticut, graduated, and wanting to get into business and sales. I have an economics degree, so I thought Wall Street was the place to be. So I did some internships before I graduated on Wall Street, which was pretty interesting. I felt like I was in the Wolf of Wall Street boiler room setting in Manhattan. I'm old enough to actually know what the phone book is and a touch tone phone with a wire to the headset of the phone, right? So it was very different back then, but I was calling, hundreds of people a day, pretending I was a stockbroker, someone else's name. And as soon as I picked someone up, I passed the phone to them. So it was a very manual intensive type SDR role, if you will.
So it was literally like that movie Boiler Room then.
It literally was. I mean, if you remember The Pursuit of Happiness with like Will Smith, and he had a time like how long it would take him, and if he did a bathroom break, like he would be off the phone, too much. And so that's literally what I was doing, age 21, in New York. It was pretty fun back then, but yeah, graduated. And then, then 9/11 happened. And it was right around that time, everything just job froze, freezing for hiring everywhere. And so I kind of, licked my wounds a little bit and started a staffing and recruiting business with my best friend's dad at the time. It was really interesting. He's a successful business owner. So we started a staffing firm, and that's really where I got into the recruiting and understanding of, trends of, different types of roles that were growing.
What were you staffing?
So we staffed salespeople. We were doing staffing for sales executives. And then it spun off another business, which was a training business. So we were recruiting and training salespeople. And we did that for 10 years successfully. I was on the road a lot, and I was always in another city and state every single week. And that at that point I was becoming a dad and like, hey, I want to do something that was, static and in my hometown or something where I didn't have to be on the road all the time. And I ran into a guy who is now the founder of this company, and he owned a company called Inside Sales Team, which really was brand new to the whole SDR role and the sales development role. And that's, where I came, and Alleyoop has been born from there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So now you skipped a part. I remember you told me that at one point you actually built the outbound program at ZoomInfo. For anyone who's like in the sales space, they're going to know who ZoomInfo is. For those of you who aren't, ZoomInfo is like the gold standard for sales contact data. So they've got like this massive database of all the business executives, globally, especially in the United States. You can kind of like do filtering by company, by industry, by revenue, by job title. And they even have like intent data. So you can see kind of like what businesses might be in the market for. I'm actually, that's a thread. I'm curious, like how they get that intent data. That would be an interesting thing if you have some insight on that. But, I'll digress back to the original point here, which was you building the original outbound program at ZoomInfo. And I'm really curious about like what that was like, what stage in the company where they're a massive, what are they, like multi-billion-dollar market cap at this point?
Yeah, they do over $1 billion in ARR. They went public in 2020 during the middle of the pandemic. They are a global leader and the largest, data provider for companies. They started off as a brand called Discover.org. And we were their only and exclusive sales development team. So they outsourced their sales development when they were getting started over to us, IST, Inside Sales Team at the time. I was actually on that project the day I started, booking demos for them just to learn the ropes. And we grew the team for almost a decade. They acquired Ranking, they acquired several other data providers. And then they finally acquired ZoomInfo and rebranded their entire business to ZoomInfo. And what's interesting is when we were building that function, that's really when the SDR role was really invented in that tech SaaS data space. And we grew it with them in a really, really good partnership. And we are still huge fans. Actually, many of the people who originally were on that project when we started it are now there running a very successful sales development function. They have hundreds of SDRs currently, and using the same technology and same plays and playbooks that we actually use today and started with back then. So it's definitely a great success story.
Awesome. What year was that? I'm curious.
That was back in 2014.
Okay.
Is when that conversation started with them and when the partnership started.
Is that, and just for the listeners, SDR is an acronym. It's Sales Development Rep, which basically means like the first person that kind of reaches out and gets meetings booked for a sales team. And then the account executive will take the meeting and, work on closing the deal. Gabe, is that kind of when you mentioned something about like this concept of an SDR emerged? Is that sort of when this sort of concept came out in that like early 2010s?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we helped, SalesLoft, Outreach.io, Sendoso, Ring Central, obviously Discover.org and ZoomInfo, all really start out back then when they were just ideas. And the SDR function, it's interesting because the role itself has evolved now into many, many other industries. It's not in just tech and SaaS anymore. Here at Alleyoop, we have clients that are literally yoga studios using our SDRs. We have, commercial cleaning companies using SDRs. We have staffing and recruiting and even insurance and even financial firms using us, even though the role started in the tech and SaaS space. So to your point, companies have realized that account executives who are self-sourcing or prospecting their own appointments and their own demos is spending 70 to 80% of their day doing it. And you don't want a high paid, subject matter expert, best in class salesperson spending 80% of their time doing cold calls and outreach. You want them selling, you want them doing demos, you want them closing deals and bringing in revenue. There's no executive that doesn't want that to be happening with your AEs. But what we found is that 80% of their day prospecting isn't going to allow that to happen. So what we did is just fragmented that sales role into two. And now the sales development rep is spending 100% of their day prospecting. And then the AE is spending 100% of their day closing deals and doing demos. So it's like football, right? You got the snapper and you got the quarterback. So you got the snapper as the SDR passing the ball to the quarterback, and then the quarterback does their play to run it across the touchdown. So That's what the SDR function is all about. And more companies are adopting it.
Yeah, makes sense. I've hired a fraction of 1% of the amount of salespeople that you've hired, I'm sure. But I've noticed that it's kind of like a rare skill, like especially the more technical a sales executive gets, like the more of a solutions kind of architect or like a solution subject matter expert they are, the less good they are at hunting.
Couldn't agree more. And, it's just like you would look at CS, right? Client success, customer success. You don't want your account executives and your sellers doing the CS. And sometimes companies are still allowing that or providing that to happen. You want them to pass the baton too. So there's the other side. Again, it's just like the assembly line, like this, in manufacturing a car. One guy's building the engine, the other guy's, putting the parts together, one guy's painting it. And then all of a sudden you have a car. So it's the same thing with the sales process. You want your SDRs prospecting, you want your marketing team before that, creating brand awareness and creating content. But then you want your SDRs, calling and getting those demos on the calendar. And then you want your sellers to sell. And then you want your engineers or subject matter experts, your sales engineers, sales enablement team to come in and be that person too. Because if you really don't want, unless depends on what you're selling, but you really don't want an AE being too technical, right? Because again, at the end of the day, it bottlenecks the entire process.
Yeah.
So that's what
totally.
we do. We help fill the funnel so the clients can then not spend all their time prospecting.
What size? So you just kind of named out a bunch of functions there, like the brand awareness marketing side. There might be some inbound or like account-based marketing or some kind of like maybe paid or SEO. Like, so a marketing team, and then you've got the SDR team, and then you've got the AE team, and then you've got technical sales enablement team. So if I had to just kind of napkin math that, I'm guessing that's probably, $5 million annually in spend at least, to hire that all in house, maybe closer to 10 million to kind of build up a redundant team across each of those functions. So what size companies typically have that built out completely? Like where does it get to a point where they're not outsourcing any of those functions, but it's all kind of built out internally?
Yeah, well, at first you can actually outsource, right? We all heard of marketing agencies, which is, and accounting agencies and HR agencies, but a lot of people don't think you can actually outsource prospecting agencies, right? This SDR agency, that's what we do. But I think you can absolutely outsource the marketing side of it if you're brand new, as well as the sales development side of it if you're brand new. The in-house is what you want to keep control is really client success. You want the AE function, more so the sales enablement function. You want to keep that in-house. So you definitely need, capital to keep that in-house, and then you can outsource the rest and then bring it in-house eventually, right? So to your point, what we like to do is we like to work with a company when they're able to just, do those 2-3 things themselves and then outsource the rest. And then eventually there's an exit strategy. Not every company is like, ZoomInfo was and worked with us for 10 years. There's an exit strategy where 2-3 years from now, you can do everything yourself and we can help you and facilitate you to get to that point. But I would say anywhere between $5-10 million in annual revenue is where you would want to be to start thinking about doing it yourself.
Yeah, cool. Okay. You said 5 to 10 million total in annual revenue before you start doing it yourself. Okay.
That's what I would say. There's companies that are much smaller than that and they're doing their own sales development, but those teams are small. And I always look at it like if you have a 1 or 2 or 3 person SDR team, it's very hard to retain an SDR, right? They want to graduate. It's an entry level role many times. So retaining them is difficult. More importantly, you want to create a culture of competition and camaraderie and competitiveness. And all of those things are hard to do with 2 or 3 people. So if you're constantly burning just through a handful of people, sure, you can sustain it at a smaller revenue number, but also, are you really getting the best out of that team? And if you outsource to us, we have 150 SDRs on our payroll, all working collectively, even though they represent different clients on assignment, all working collectively. That environment is much more productive if you rent it, if you will, right? Two SDRs from us than if you actually did it yourself.
I want to take a quick break from the episode and say, if you're enjoying this content, the best way you can say thank you is to subscribe. So if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, hit the subscribe button there as well. And also share it out to your friends and colleagues. If you find this content useful and you think other people will enjoy it as well, please send it out. And back to the episode. And to your point, the 5 or 10 million, that even seems low to me to build all that out in-house. I mean, unless you're venture backed and you have, 100 million in the bank and you're at 10 million ARR, but you've got like a, 2-year, 3-year runway and you're just kind of like doubling down on growth. But that 5 to 10 million in revenue seems low to me, because I think to like fully build out a marketing team, fully build out a, full stack sales team from SDR to AE to sales enablement, that seems like you're getting, at least well into a few 7-figure, year annual cost to maintain all those teams. I mean, that's, 3-4 teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, that's, I think, where you need to start thinking about it. I don't think you need to build all of it out at that exact moment, but I think that's where you should start thinking about, okay, how do we start putting this in-house, and what levers do we need to start pulling to bring this in-house, if you ever want to do that at all. Again, we have companies that have inside sales teams with us for many, 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 many years and have zero intention of ever doing it, because they know what they're good at, and it's not this, right? And so it depends on really the vision of the founders. Do they want it all in-house eventually, or do they want to, bring in experts and keep it that way for a long time?
So I'm curious too. So that's a good segue here for something that I've been thinking about. So I'm curious, how often, is it just like a company doesn't know how to tactically execute on sales versus, in my opinion, a CEO and a leadership team, but especially a CEO, needs to have a sales oriented vision for the company on how they go to market. What's the go to market strategy? What's our wedge? How do we differentiate? What's our ICP? What's our buyer persona? If a CEO relies on an external agency to determine that stuff, I think they're just setting up to fail. I don't think that's the kind of stuff that you should outsource. I think you need to have a clear vision as a CEO on how you go to market, who your customers are, and how you're going to reach them. And then the outsourcing is just the tactical execution. Maybe there can be some like consulting involved, but I think it needs to be, 80+% kind of figured out before you outsource it. And I'm wondering how often you see that, where a CEO or a company really has like no vision and their sales are floundering, but like how much of it is the tactical execution missing versus just a complete lack of vision and strategy?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because that's really where we have to figure that out on these calls. Like it's easy to just go out and do a demo, and everyone, I want more demos, I want more leads. Like no one says no to that. But we have to, unfortunately, turn down a lot of companies who come to us because they're looking at us as the problem that needs to be fixed. But reality is that actually is not the case. Like right now, we're seeing a lot of companies getting so many demos. And the reality is the AE team that they've hired over the last few years, or have been very used to low-hanging fruit. Everything's been really, really great. Budgets for everything. Sales deals are happening very, very quickly. The sales cycle is very, very short. And now things are getting much tighter, especially in the tech and SaaS space. And those AEs are being really exposed right now, right? And so we're sending demos over the fence, over to their teams, and they're just not closing deals. And it's not because they don't have enough demos anymore, right? So a lot of companies come to us and say, hey, we need more. They figure all that out. They have the vision, like you mentioned. Then we just need more demos. We send them over, and they're realizing, hey, they're not closing the deals. So you're right. That has to be baked out. And we have to, unfortunately, sometimes turn down opportunities because the CEO doesn't have the vision. There isn't a product market fit. There isn't, a baked out solution that, that we can bring to the market with confidence. And that definitely has to happen in order for us to be operating at, at all full cylinders.
Yeah. Interesting. Because I think that's a probably a common thread in the industry, where, companies will come to a firm like yours and say, hey, we need more sales. And, there can be some level of strategy that you guys do, but you can't be the CEO for your clients. Like they need a strong, for you to be successful for a client, the organization needs to be led by a leadership team with a strong go-to-market vision and a clear understanding of how to execute that vision. And then you guys are basically the boots on the ground that go and run with the torch there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing we always ask a CEO if they get on the call is like, hey, how can you help me? And we tell them and we show them and it's great. And then our question back to them is, okay, so Mr. CEO, if we have 100 meetings on the calendar next month, what are you going to do with them? Right. And if they don't have good answer to that question, it's concerning for us. Right. So again, we can create the meetings and we can expose them to demos, but if they don't know what to do after that, what happens? Or even a step further, let's say they do sell 50% of those demos, 25%. Are they going to be able to execute on the offering that it is they're promising their customer? And if they can't follow through with that, then that gets broken as well. So again, it is all connected, but you're right. There has to be a rock hard, vision from the founder or the CEO, and their team, when wanting to go to market and adding a function like us to it.
Cool. All right, good. I want to go back to Zoom Info about the insights. The what do they call them? Like the intent data. They have these kind of like scoops or intent data, whatever they call them, where it's like, hey, XYZ company is likely to outsource sales development in the next 3 months, or they're likely to outsource, they have an accounting audit. They're looking for an accounting firm to deal with this accounting audit or whatever the scoop is. So like, where does that data come from? Do you have any insight on how they get these scoops data?
Well, originally they built it with a company and used, I believe it was Bombora, and this is all public knowledge, but yeah, they use a company that focuses specifically on intent. And then I know that once they brought everything in house and acquired a handful of other companies, they started just doing it themselves. And so it's a culmination of a lot. They have thousands of researchers, physical humans, researching all the data as well as asking questions on whether or not things are happening in the marketplace. They're looking at website traffic and competitor traffic and what people are shopping for. So they have a lot of different levers that they are spending a lot of money on and to provide that product. But it is one that I feel is what every SDR team, every sales team needs. If you attach a human to a list of intent, you can take over markets, right? So that is really, really good data to go after because, to your point, they're seeing what's going on. The scoops are coming in, and we all know timing is probably the most important thing in sales. And if that is already, if you already know that magic 8 ball about the timing piece, everything else is just pretty much, whether or not you can figure out how to sell it or not.
So what do they do? Just put up like websites with white papers and just, have someone download a white paper and put in their name and email. And then they're like, all right, now we know this company is potentially, they're downloading a white paper. So they're potentially interested in this type of service. Like maybe it's a white paper on SAP.
There's a lot of moving parts, but that's definitely one of the things that they 100% do. But if I'm a researcher and I find out, I'm asking you questions because, you may or may not get these calls, but I sometimes do. And they ask me just, survey questions, and that information is also really, really valuable. And then they pump that information into their system, and you can use it as intent.
Do you take those calls? I always hang up on them.
Well, because I'm in the business of cold calling, I always take a cold call if I can, just so I can critique the person, see maybe I can hire them, right? But at the end of the day, I want to hear what people are sounding like on the phones because that's the space that I live in. So I'm one of the weird ones that actually take those calls. But
so I'll take a cold call if like they'll hit my cell phone, and if I can tell in the first like 3 words out of their mouth that they're a good SDR. Like if I can tell that they're like seasoned and they've got like some kind of charisma and some mojo to them, then I'll say, all right, 10 seconds, shoot your shot. And then, I'll see what they say. If they can get me hooked in 10 seconds, then I'll have a call with them. Otherwise, I'm like, all right, sorry, I'm not interested.
I'd love that. I'm the same way. I mean, I value cold calls that are really, really good. It's funny, a quick story. I actually got a cold call from a young kid. He was brand new into the space, but he was really good. And the product, we actually already have it. So we didn't need it. It wasn't a deal. But I listened to the guy, and then I said, hey, I don't know. Do you know what I do? And he's like, and then he did the research. So I gave him some advice on his cold call. And this is a real story. And what happened was I never met this guy. After I got off the phone, his dad apparently owns a tech company in New York. And after he got off the phone, I got an email an hour later from his dad, the CEO of this company. Now, he wasn't working for his dad, totally different business. And he asked for a demo because he was looking for some sales reps himself. And we got a client out of it, all because of the cold call that was nothing to do with the company.
Oh,
So
wow. That's ridiculous. That's
pretty
so
funny
cool,
how
man.
that all worked out. But yeah, I take the cold call. But to your point, I really only set the meeting with ones that are really good, and hopefully coach the ones that need some help, because it is a tough job, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is a tough job. It's funny, like you mentioned earlier the boiler room thing. So when I started my first company, this was back in like 2007 or something, 2008. I would just, it was like I was starting a web design company right when the
Yeah.
markets were tanking back in the housing bubble. And I was down in Florida. So it was like I was calling on small businesses in Florida, which was like the worst hit economy in the entire country. And basically my strategy for getting customers at the time was I got the phone book. I started at A, and I just like slammed amp energy drinks and just like I would do like 400 calls a day and just like dial through and I just basically slammed the phone book for the whole day. Like, hey, you're spending money on the yellow pages. How about a website?
Oh my God. That's crazy. Yeah, absolutely, man. I love it.
Yeah, that's cool. So, all right, cool. Let's move on.
Okay.
So I'm actually curious. So you've got this like pretty large sales SDR operation. I'm guessing it's probably one of the larger, teams in the country. If I had to bet, but you've got this pretty large sales operation. I'm curious, like, is there some kind of like synergy or sort of like network effect that you can achieve with a team that big? For instance, can you kind of like, if is it like a one-to-one with the reps where like one rep is calling for one company, or is there a way that reps can kind of like load balance multiple companies where they're calling and it's like, oh, hey, this isn't a fit, but maybe they can cross sell leads across multiple companies? Is there any aspect of that going on?
Right. So great question. So we're a fully remote company. So doing what we do remotely is even more challenging. But I think we've really cracked the code in creating a competitive environment, yet a fun culture to win in. And the big thing that we're really excited about here at Alleyoop is that we have people who have been with us 3, 4, 5 times the industry average of tenure when it comes to these sales reps types of roles. And so that's really unique to us. And the way we do it, to be specific, is we have, as you know, alley-oops are our name. So the shoot the shot, right? The basketball theme that we have, we carry that into our everyday life. So all of our sales reps are on a pod or on a team of 6 to 7, and they have a team captain, just like a basketball team. We have a team captain who's a player coach and an accountability partner. And even though they're on different projects or different clients, they all work together to hit their mark, hit their number, hit their activity metrics, and keep each other accountable. And then those small micro teams are across an entire organization. We have them all competing against each other every single month, just like you would see a bracket or a sports competition. And that's how we keep that culture happen. So we have a very big gamification throughout the day. We're all celebrating all the little wins throughout the day, and it really creates a good competitive environment. What we don't do is we don't share meetings across clients. That's a big no-no here, because we want that the integrity of those meetings to be sitting with that client and only that client. But we definitely share best practices. We definitely share, we do call camp every single week to determine, hey, this is a great call. Keep doing that. Here's how we would critique you. So we're constantly, it's really like an education. It's a university for sales reps, essentially. We always say we have Alleyoop alumni. So we celebrate when they do leave, because all of our programs have a direct hire function. So our sales reps can actually get a job, a full-time job at our clients at the end of the agreement that we have with them. So they can even grow their career from here. And we have countless stories of people who are executives at many, many, many companies who all started off, as a sales rep here at Alleyoop.
Oh, that's awesome. You made me think of something.
Okay.
So you mentioned these pods, and the pods are kind of like on a scoreboard against each other, and sort of trying to like rise the ranks of top performing pod. What is the qualities of an SDR and also like a pod that make them perform is there like quantifiable things you can point to and say like, all right, I know this person's going to crush it? Or is there some level of like just luck and kind of randomness out there?
Yeah, it's funny. So I ran the recruiting function, and still, you have before you get a job at Alleyoop, you have to go through a session with me before you actually get hired. So I call it Gabe's Gauntlet. It's definitely nerve wracking, but we do literally mock phone calls before.
Do they have to sell you a pen?
Essentially, yeah. But no, it's interesting because the big things that we look for is not really on a resume. And I think you're, an executive, and I think you would agree with this, right? Like you're not really looking for the resume, even though it's important. You're looking for, consistency. You're looking for grit. You're looking for, drive and desire. And I want to see how you respond to negativity. In sales, you're going to hear no before you hear yes, right? So how do you respond to that and not react, but respond to it? And so we look for people who have grit. We look for people who want to go the extra mile. We look for hungry people who want to, really make their mark. And that's what we look for when it comes to hiring. And we usually get it right. Sometimes we don't. But when we do, our coaching, the training, really takes them to the whole nother level.
Is that behavioral interview or how do you figure
we
those
look
things
at
out?
EQ. Yeah, exactly. Emotional intelligence. We look at how do they respond to different reactions. We ask them to give us examples of stories that have, occurred in their life, even personal stories, if that's relevant. A big question that I like to ask in an interview is, tell me about a time where everything wasn't going right. Whether maybe with a customer that was upset, or maybe it was a colleague that was upset and it just wasn't going right, and you got it fixed, and how you got it fixed. Like that's a question I would ask in an interview, which many people don't ask those types of questions, I think, right now in interviews. So that's important to us.
Yeah. Okay. And is there like ever just like a single thing that you can boil it down to, just like a single quality that, if somebody has that quality, you're going to hire them every single time?
I don't have a silver bullet where they just say, "Oh, that's definitely it." It's almost more of like a culmination of a series of questions, and it's a fit. We also have a democracy of things here, so we have a team of people who all have to vote on everyone who comes in, because they're going to be managing them, and I want the managers to get excited about this person. It's almost like a draft, right? Like, oh, I want that person on my team. Yeah, so we have that happening here as well. So it's a collective effort. And also at the same time, we want to make sure that the people that we're interviewing we know what they want. We know what their why is. We ask that, like, what is your why? And we get really specific because we actually incentivize all of our reps differently. I know that may sounds crazy, but if somebody wants time off and that's their motivator, like we'll give them that as their incentive if they hit this. If it's money or monetarily, we're going to do that. If it's physical prizes, we will actually do that.
How do you figure that out?
What's that?
How do you figure that out? You just ask them, or
we send them a survey. It's anonymous to just the leadership team. So we obviously know, but no one else does. And we send them an individual survey and how they want to be rewarded. And they tell us what their why is, what they're looking for, why they want to, earn this money is going to get them what. I know this, gentleman on my team, he wants to get a ring for his fiance, for his girlfriend, so he can get married. I know another one, he wants to buy a house with his wife right now and his 2 kids who he just had.
Wow, man, this is like the master class on how to hire and train SDRs. This is really good stuff. Like really tying, it's like in sales with psychology, like you're tying the real tangible emotional thing to the work that needs to be done. Yeah. Or it's like the task at hand, essentially.
And we have a grandfather, a gentleman who was very, very successful in business and sales, but just was done with the big pressure of it, and is now an SDR. And you may think, wait, you have a guy who's done successfully and he's in his 60s and he's an SDR? Like, yeah, absolutely, and he absolutely loves it and he's crushing it. But he's a grandfather, and his motivation is to spend time with his grandkids. And he can, clock in, crank out a ton of calls, book a ton of meetings, talk to CEOs all day long. And if he does it really well every single month, he can get up to 30 days of PTO, and he loves that. So that is very different in regards to how to incentivize him than someone who just, finished bartending school and is 22 and wants to be an SDR too. So it's uniquely different, but we can put together comp plans for them, specifically.
Wow, that's really awesome. So you just one-off customize every single comp plan. Is there like a sort of like a decision tree where it's kind of automated, or do you actually does a sales manager actually create every single one?
So the comp plans are the same, but the incentives are different. So everyone has the same comp plan and it's based on percentage of quota. So if you're at 25% quota, because the quotas could be different, right? So clients, if our client is an ERP system and it's a $250,000, software annually, you're probably going to get a lot less meetings booked than if we were selling a $100 HR subscription, right? So the meeting count is a variable, but the quota percentage is static. So if I'm an SDR and I need to get 25 meetings a month, that's my quota. And if I'm an SDR on a different project, I have to get 10 meetings a month, that's my quota. But at the end of the day, if you're 25% quota or 50% quota or 75% quota, 100% quota, that is the same monetary amount, or you can choose various things. So it's like a buffet. So do you want to get financial bonus? Do you want to get time off? Right? Or do you want to get a specific gift of things that we have?
Yeah, that's cool.
So, yeah.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I love that strategy. So changing gears, you said something earlier that caught my interest to double click on, and that was about kind of this like market trends from 2021 to where we are today in 2023, where there was all this money on the streets floating around, sloshing around. There was, budgets galore. Everyone was buying, everyone was saying yes to everything. Sales was super easy. Hiring was the bottleneck back then. And now like the market's completely flipped. Sales is difficult, at least, from my experience in the market lately. It's been, sales has been like way more difficult, way more headwinds. Before we had a lot of tailwinds. Now we're having a lot of headwinds, forcing against the sales process. So I'm curious, like, just because you have such a large data pool, I'm curious, like, how like, is there a quantified metric to that? Like, have you seen, is it like calls to meeting ratio? Do you have something like that where it's like, before we had to do, 100 calls to get a meeting, now we're doing like 300 calls to get a meeting? Is there some like KPI or metric around that you can kind of like aggregate across the entire market?
For calls, it's doubled. We have to make twice the amount of calls right now to get the same amount of metrics we did a few years ago. And I think it's a culmination of things. Phone, by the way, is still the number one channel when it comes to getting a meeting on the calendar. And that's just not me speaking. We do literally tens of thousands of calls a day company-wide. But even our big clients, even ZoomInfo and other companies that we are connected with, phone is still king when it comes to the channel in which is most effective.
Even when you're calling on tech companies or enterprise?
Absolutely.
How do you get through the gatekeepers on those?
So that's part of our training. So we actually train exactly how to get around gatekeepers to get people to say yes to a meeting. And we have 10 different training topics or 10 different objections that we train, and one of them is specifically gatekeepers. We actually break it down even more specifically than that. Gatekeepers could be an executive assistant or a receptionist, and those are even different. And you talk to those two people differently as well. So, yeah, I mean, right now it's about twice the amount of phone calls that are needing to be made, and emails is also down a little bit. But the answer to question is, what do you do about it? Do you just make twice the amount of phone calls? The answer is no, but you definitely make more, but you can also be more personalized and more relevant. And I think right now, automation has created so much stuff getting thrown your way through automation that you have to figure out ways to cut through the noise and be relevant. And that's the big piece of it. I think personalization is important, but not like it used to be. People are like, oh, wow, I saw you went to the same college as my buddy Fred did. I'd be like, that's not personalization like it used to be. Everyone sees through that these days. It's relevance that wins. And if you can be relevant and stick out and do something different, maybe like create a custom video or do something that is human, people are going to gravitate towards that over all the static emails that are being sent.
I was telling you the story earlier before we started recording where I saw this SDR. Basically, he had this small list of targets he wanted to get in front of. And his way to do it was he said, all right, I'm sending you an email. I really, I already tried to reach you. You didn't respond. I really want you to see this pitch. So I'm going to deliver the pitch on a video embedded in this email while I'm housing 10 super hot habanero wings. So he's like, and I watched the video, he's like sweating and his like eyes are watering up and turning red. And he's like doing his pitch. There's like hot sauce on his face.
See, that to me is amazing, right? Like we're all addicted to, TikTok and, videos and reels and Instagram. Like everyone's watching this stuff, right? And so people are gravitated to it for a reason. I don't know if it's addicting. I don't know if it's entertaining, but people love it. I'm not saying you have to be a TikTok, influencer to be an SDR or a sales rep. But I am saying is if you did create a custom video like that guy did or something different where you can physically have a face-to-face, eye-to-eye contact through video and send them something, I'm telling you, it's going to be more responsive than sending somebody an email 15 times that sounds exactly the same as everyone else.
Yeah.
Voice notes are huge. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
On LinkedIn, I do voice notes all the time. If someone's reaching out to me, it's easier for me personally to do it. But at the end of the day, I'd rather hear someone's voice. It's like walkie-talkie, right? You say one thing and then someone says another thing. So voice notes are really big too, to get someone's attention. And also they're curious, right? If you just see a voice note come through on your LinkedIn, like you can't see what they're saying, but you want to know what they're saying. So you're just going to hit it, right? Because you're just kind of curious. And then it creates more of an interaction and it's more effective. It's proven to be more effective.
Yeah, interesting. Does that work on email too, or is that more of a LinkedIn thing?
I think it's more on LinkedIn. It's really hard to do a voice note on email, but definitely on LinkedIn, you can do it on the native app on LinkedIn on your phone. It's built in very nicely. Through video, I would say is the best way to do it. There's a bunch of companies, BombBomb, Vidyard, Vidoo, are all great companies that allow you to make a quick Loom. And I know a lot of people use Loom to make a quick video. Sometimes I require it. If like I literally put someone to the test. Someone sends me a message on LinkedIn and said, hey, and they do like a whole description. I literally respond, can you make a 2-minute Loom video on exactly what it is your offering is? And I'll ask them that. And for the ones who actually do it, I'll take the meeting. Because most of the time it's a good conversation, but more importantly, it shows that there is a real person behind this and this is a true offering and you can really evaluate it in a 2-minute video than, 3 paragraphs of nonsense.
Yeah, that's really good. So 2 things I want to go into. We kind of talked about the state of outbound and how it's more difficult. I think I agree. There's a lot of noise. I'm seeing more AI. I'm also seeing just more like, for lack of a better word, jabronis kind of getting into the game where they're just sort of like doing a half-assed automated, their subject lines are all jacked up. Their emails, like, you can tell they copy and pasted it out of a Google Doc and the formatting's all messed up. And so there's just like a lot of like, kind of like really entry level players in the outbound space that are just not doing a good job. My personal opinion is that I don't know if you ever heard of the cold email wizard on Twitter, but he's like he trained like an army. He built this course on Gumroad and trained an army of like tens of thousands of people how to do cold email across the globe. So I think and it's sort of like, scammy kind of like low grade tactics for cold email. So I think the cold email wizard might be to blame for the flooding in the industry of kind of low level cold email, low quality cold email. But I'm curious. So you kind of talked about video and you just kind of went into it a little bit there, but you also mentioned earlier before we hit record that, you actually give HD cameras to all of your reps and it's, kind of like a part of your process. So I'm curious is that what you have them do? Just those 2-minute Loom videos and the outreach process, or what does that video outbounding look like?
Yeah, so we did do that. We bought cameras for everybody, but we did it for 2 reasons. One is all about, of course, prospecting and getting more effective meetings on the calendar, but also from a culture perspective, right? If you're running a remote team, we all remember back in the day, like we're on audio conference calls, but with video, it really changes everything. And just from an internal culture standpoint, like all of our calls are video. We have to be on video for our team meetings. and we're a video first company because it creates that in-office feel and that culture that is so important. We have situations where I've worked with some of my colleagues for years. I mean, I was invited to their wedding, and I think it was the second or maybe the first time I ever met them physically. But we worked together for years on video, yet we're being invited to weddings, and that's how close of a relationship, colleague-wise, you're working with people, all because of video. I guarantee if we didn't have video, it probably would have not happened because of that relationship is so much more important when you see the person. So that was one of the reasons why we did it. The other reason is, to your point, is you're cutting through the noise. So you can create a short personalized video as an SDR and send that out, and then you can track it. So it gives you an opportunity to track it as well. So you can see, did they watch it? How long did they watch it for? Did they watch it more than once? Did they click on any links or go to our website at the end? And it really gives you some analytics behind it, and then allows you to maybe make a call. And it's kind of serendipitous, right? Imagine, you just watched a video and then 30 seconds later, you got a phone call from that person. And, like, oh my God, I was just watching a video. Oh, funny you said that. Yeah, I know. So it's a little awkward and kind of stalkerish, but at the same time, it also creates the power of, human connection, and then relevancy, of course, is on top of mind. So that's important.
I like that you're honest about it, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's such a coincidence, but it's like, yeah, that's a bullshit.
No, absolutely. I'm direct about it because they all know these days, right? Especially if we're selling our program. I mean, think about that. Let's say one of my Alleyoop SDRs sent it to you and then called, and the pitch was, wouldn't it be great if we treated you just like your prospects? And they're like, oh, wow. Yeah, I actually wouldn't mind if this is professional. This is great. I would love for you to talk to my prospects like this. And so that's a great way to start a conversation to sell our services. But at the end of the day, it's definitely most effective.
Yeah, that's cool. So you kind of briefly touched on automation, and a lot of that nowadays is AI powered, AI driven. Do you think AI is a good thing or a bad thing in these sales tool sets that are out there? I'm thinking of like 6 Sense and some of those other kind of AI powered outbounding tools.
I mean, it's the old controversy, like, is robots good or bad? Amy as a robot, right? So, like, is it a good or bad thing? I don't know. Jetsons was pretty cool when I was a kid, and I love sci-fi. But the reality is to be more real, right? Is it good? I think it's great as a tool, but I think the idea of it replacing all salespeople is just too far-fetched for now. But do we use AI? Yeah, we use Claude, we use ChatGPT, we use tools that integrate with those platforms to allow for better messaging and more personalization. And can you get things better or accomplished faster with AI? Sure. And it's something that we absolutely think is great. But do I think it's going to be a replacement of human interaction? Not yet, and I hope it's not. So because I think we would all miss it and probably want to go back. I don't know yet, but I'm not I don't have the magic 8 ball, but I do know that AI is definitely here to stay, and it's getting better every day, and it's something we should embrace. But I don't think we should just, stop our sales budget and marketing budget and just go all in on an AI platform.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is like kind of like almost a 1984 dystopian future moment for society.
Sure.
And I talk about, I kind of talk about both sides with people all the time, because it's an interesting, thought experiment or just kind of discussion. I had Xavier on the pod a couple episodes ago, who's the CEO of Presto, which is you would probably, if you ever been in like an Applebee's or a Chili's or an Outback Steakhouse,
yep,
they make that tablet that sits on the table where you can send new orders to the kitchen and check out your bill.
Yep.
So they're a pretty sizable company. I think they're in the hundreds of employees, and they've been around for a decade or two. But that's their legacy product. And the new product they're building is 100% AI-driven drive-through automation. So you can basically go through a restaurant and you go through a drive-through and like talk to a AI order taker. And I think, from what he was explaining, the technology is such that like you can't actually tell it's AI. It's that good at this point. And I think he didn't get super into it, but I think the next stage of that is to actually like automate the kitchen and the cooking, like the equipment. And then I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, all right, well then Tesla has the self-driving trucks. So you roll a semi up to the, self-driving semi up to the building. You get one of those like figure robots to offload the stuff from the truck and then clean the equipment, reload the machines. And you've got an autonomous, no person, McDonald's now. Like no one's in there. Like no one's in the building. It's just, the doors lock themselves at night. It's just fully autonomous, facility.
Exactly. I mean, is it going that route? Sure. I mean, that's Back to the Future 101. I think it's definitely going that route. And I think, we either embrace it and use it as an advantage to do our jobs more effectively, or we, don't, and then things crumble. I saw a really cool thing. It was Fiverr actually that posted on LinkedIn yesterday, and it says, AI, allowed me to do my job better, right? As opposed to AI replaced my job. And so, yes, are people going to be displaced? Sure. Just like in the car business when, robots were on the assembly line and a lot of people were displaced when building cars. So the same thing's going to happen, in our world as well. But at the end of the day, I think right now what we should be doing is using it as a way to augment our profession as opposed to worry about it being replaced tomorrow.
We have a client at Curotech that's like 150 years old. And they were massive, like way back in the day, massive government contractor. And their business was horseshoe nails for the military. And so they basically were like the largest horseshoe nail government contractor. They would sell to like the Revolutionary War days or whatever, like back there. I guess maybe it was like Civil War days. I don't know, but like way back in, I don't know history well, but way back in those early day wars, they would be supplying the horseshoe nails to the military. And then obviously, in the 1900s, that business goes belly up. Now their business is parachutes and there's like fuel, there's like mid-air receptacle fueling where you have like the fuel tank and then like the helicopter or the plane comes in and like connects to the other plane and then like they refuel mid-air. Yeah. So they make the mid-air refueling things and they make the parachutes now. And
that's incredible.
Yeah, so they went from one business to another. Like obviously parachutes and mid-air refueling wasn't a business back when they were making horseshoe nails. So one category goes away, another category, evolves.
Yeah. And I think pivoting is like a word that really needs to be adopted by so many founders right now. Like there's a lot of companies doing very, very well. And I think a lot of them, the ones that are know how to pivot and are accepting that as a best practice. And so pivoting is something we all have to, really embrace, and change is a good thing. And if you adopt to it. And so I couldn't agree more.
Cool. Well, hey man, this was a great episode. Really enjoyed, like we hit so many things. I think this is going to be a good one. Probably some good short bites out of this too. How do you want to close it out? Obviously, do a quick pitch for Alleyoop. If anyone's looking for a killer outbound sales team, where do they find you? What do you want them to know about your value prop?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the time and this has been awesome. For those who want to talk with us about what we do here at Alleyoop, if you're looking at, adding more sales reps to your team this year and next year, but want to do it without the massive overhead and the management of doing it, we can do it for you. Simply just reach out to me directly. We'll give you a discount if you come through Brian. So make sure you mention his name. I'm on LinkedIn, Gabe Lullo. I'm on LinkedIn and very active there. And then, of course, our website is alleyoop.io.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put the links in the show notes as well. So for the listeners that want to check those out, just go into the show notes. And that's it, man. That's the episode.
Cash flow? Did you clear your cash flow?